to a very special episode of Blah Blah Comics, Blah Blah Curse Words. I'm Derek.
I'm Colby.
And we are talking comics. This time, specifically, we're going to talk about the Umbrella Academy.
Yay! Finally.
Yes. So this was a comic, if our longtime listeners may remember, Colby listed among his favorite comics of all time from our very first episode.
Yes, I didn't just list it, it was number one.
Right. I said that I had planned to read it, and at the time I had planned to read it. Unfortunately, it took me forever to get around to picking up a copy. I have only read the first volume. I've read Apocalypse Suite. I've not read... Oh god, I'm blanking on the name.
Dallas.
Dallas. Okay, so... but we did want to talk about it, considering it is one of Colby's favorite books and a book that I have recently experienced. If you have not read Umbrella Academy, I'm once again afraid we are probably going to discuss some spoilers.
Yes.
Just because it's really hard to talk about a 6-issue miniseries or 6-issue self-contained story without going into some of the spoilers. So if you haven't read Apocalypse Suite and you want to go into it fresh, this is yet another episode. You may want to go ahead and skip until you have a chance to read it.
Yep.
If you don't mind hearing the spoilers, please listen away.
Yep.
So
it's almost 10 years old. I think spoilers are fair game.
True. Though I know for a fact my wife has borrowed my copy and not had a chance to read it, so I definitely should be listening to this one.
Yeah.
So the big thing I wanted to touch on, which I mentioned to you before we started recording, was this definitely has an air. One would say an homage to a deep and heavy homage to both classic and Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. And I know that's something you mentioned when you were talking about how much you loved it, but I really saw it when I actually read the book. It's not just the whole, discombobulated heroes, the heroes with weird or hard to use powers. It's also the, and I cannot remember their adoptive father's name. But he was. Oh, do you remember?
Hang on. I'll have to double check. We said before the podcast we were talking about it. It's been about maybe like a month since you've read it.
Right.
And I've read it a ton in my life, but I haven't read it recently. So if I forget something, it's there. I just can't remember the specific of it, honestly. But yes, keep going. I'll have the wiki or something opened up just to fact check.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great idea. But yeah, the father figure character had such a Niles Calder from Doom Patrol bent to him. For those of you who haven't read Doom Patrol, Niles Calder was the more or less Professor Xavier of the Doom Patrol, except for the fact that whereas Professor Xavier is kind of a hidden shit, and most people don't realize that he's actually kind of a terrible person, Niles Calder is outwardly a terrible person who says and does terrible things to his team.
So, it's Original Hargreaves.
Okay. Yes.
And
yes.
With the one twist in this book, which I've always loved, though, it's that twist exactly, except if that shit was your adoptive father from birth.
Right. Exactly. Which definitely took it out of the realm of parody or outright aping, and definitely into the realm of homage, because it's not just your boss or the person who, quote unquote, rescued you in the case of, Rita or the Negative Man from the original Doom Patrol. It is someone who has more or less raised you from birth, who
he had raised
you from birth,
yes.
who...
How instead of being like I said, instead of being a boss or being someone that just recently came to your life and story-wise, he was there from the beginning and molded you to be what you are. Right.
Someone who even, if I remember the story correctly, someone who bought you at birth because of the Rising Stars S, again, homage style origin story for these characters. That does make it much more different and much more emotionally brutal to have such an asshole. Then again, he uses that assholishness to really good effect in regards to... Is she like Dark Violin, White Violin, the Violin?
Oh yeah, well she becomes White Violin. She starts
White
off
Violin,
as just number 7.
Right, but I think this is all subtext. This isn't actually stated in the text, but my feeling was he used his overall complete dickishness to the family to kind of hide and subsume the fact that the White Violin would be the most powerful and the most destructive of the Umbrella Academy, and therefore try to keep her away from discovering her powers.
Yes, that's an angle I've always really liked about it, because it's a book that, for such a crazy book, does have some nuances to it that it's pulled off really well like that. It's never outright said that Hargreaves purposely protected the other children by making her feel way worse than all the others and feel like complete shit. But it's kind of implied that, yeah, he may have saved the entire universe by making his daughter feel like shit.
Right.
And making her...
But unfortunately, that also left her open to the villains who eventually managed to tap that power out of her. One wonders if he had a contingency plan in place that was not instituted due to his untimely death, or what the plan was once he was out of the picture.
Yes, and there's also... that's actually something that I want to talk about is the kids themselves. The story, how it's structured, is structured for a first story actually somewhat different than most, because the beauty about this, it is very much an homage to Doom Patrol, and you hear anything from Gerard Way, he always talks about his big influence for his series, where of course Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, a ton of Grant Morrison work, so there'd be Filter and Visibles, even like some Mike Mignola stuff. I think it was Champion of the Worms, and of course some Hellboy, and
of course
a lot of that kind of stuff. And you really feel that even from Gabriel Baugh's art, which I love the art in this book more than almost any other art. It fits the story perfectly, and it's art that technically you wouldn't think should work for a superhero book. Which at the end of the day is kind of what this is.
Right. No, it's definitely art that fits the tone, and it's also stunningly beautiful on its own. It is very Magnolia-esque without aping or parodying Mignola's work. It's definitely, again, the feel of homage is quite strong, but it's its own thing. And I think that's probably the best thing the Umbrella Academy is able to pull off, is it never feels like a ripoff. It never feels like I've seen this before, I've read this before, I've experienced this before, despite the fact that, you can break it apart to its constituent puzzle pieces and be like, okay, this is very clearly influenced by A. This was clearly, an homage to B. But I guess it's a case of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes, very much. And like I was getting back to earlier, this starts on what essentially, it does have a quick origin at the beginning.
Right.
But besides that, essentially what starts the whole events is Hargreaves' death and all his kids being brought back to their birthplace, or not birthplace, their birth home of raising, for the funeral. And in the story, you already get a sense of so much has happened to these characters. For one of the team has already died in the story, and there's already the giant horror statue in front of the house, or behind the house, where he has died. You have Hargreaves dead. You have Space Boy. You see him in Origin, then next time you see him, he has the head of a man, the body of a gorilla.
Right, now that was actually something I wanted to ask you about. Is that a body of a gorilla, or is that some kind of weird gorilla suit that he can't take off?
I believe it is a straight up body of a gorilla.
Okay.
Yeah, because he had he had a mission to Mars that went bad, and they transplanted onto it. Yeah, it's a Martian gorilla. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, he has the body of a Martian gorilla.
I love the weird 50s pulp sci-fi angle of that character, and then the very 90s Vertigo esque character of what's his name? The dude with the hands, the tattoos.
Seance.
Seance, yes. Very 90s Vertigo-esque character.
Yes.
Rumor definitely feels like a pretty traditional superhero.
Yeah, I mean, you have, and even like I said, the rumor having one of my favorite powers of any superhero or any comic ever, which is if she starts a rumor, it's automatically true.
Right. It's similar to Jesse Custer's Word of God.
Yeah.
But a little bit different, because I'm assuming the hearer, their listener, I guess, doesn't have to be in earshot for reality to warp around the story of this rumor.
There's another Umbrella Academy story that was, I believe, one of the MySpace Dark Horse Presents, or one of those quick ones.
Right.
And it's I can't remember what volume it's in or where it's at. It may actually be in the back of Volume 1 or Volume 2 as a bonus. But it's a quick story where Rumor is dead, and you don't know what's going on. You found out that it's basically she lied to someone. She didn't want to hurt their feelings that she was going to be at their party. So rumor was at their party, but she was somewhere else. And this villain had killed that rumor, and they eventually caught who did it. But it was always a really interesting thing because it did play with that idea of the reader and listener never heard her say that, but yet it happened.
Right.
And that's not in Apocalypse, but it's still it's something that goes with the power, and I always thought was really interesting. Also, the dynamic with the characters for a book that just starts off, like I said, in mid their career, once they've already kind of hated each other, broken up, semi.
It definitely drops you in the story in media res.
It does, and you get a dynamic of these characters pretty quickly without this overdrawn plot given to you.
Right.
Which I always appreciated because I've always been a fan of just, here's the world, here's the story, you get used to it, you'll like it or you won't like it. It's jumping in head first, and you don't, so because of that, you don't get the, 50-page origin for each character followed by 50 pages of what could have been. I mean, there could have been so much material here, but I honestly feel like there's so much boiled out of this equation that it makes it a much better read because of it.
And see, that was actually one thing that I did want to discuss with you, because while I appreciate it, I'm not entirely sure I like it. There are aspects of it I like, because it definitely shows Gerard Way has an incredibly deft hand at discovering and allowing the permutation of relationships throughout the book. The fact that Spaceboy had a crush on Rumor was very, very evident to the reader by, for one, Bau's art, because the way he drew the longing looks and the tenderness of the character towards Rumor was very instrumental in creating that feel, but also just in the dialogue and in the things that Spaceboy didn't say, the holes in things allowed that relationship to blossom for the reader in a way that I thought was really special. But on the other hand, like you said, the story opens. I don't know if it's all the way at issue 2 or it may halfway be through issue 1, but we start out with Spaceboy having returned from the moon. We had or wherever he was from, he was in space. We had no idea from prior, the little bit of origin story that we got, that he had any interest in space. His head's grafted onto a Martian gorilla's body, which honestly takes a few pages for you to realize exactly what's going on with that. And then my biggest complaint is also one of the things I like most about the series. We have absolutely no reason to believe the White Violin has any powers, except for the fact that, of course, she does.
Yeah.
It very much feels like, again, going back to the Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol conversation, but that feels like a plot point that would have been developed prior to Grant Morrison taking over Doom Patrol. That feels like him taking over. Oh God, now I'm forgetting Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol characters, but the Negative Man substitute that he brought in that turned out to be not transsexual, but like female and male, depending on what aspect he was using, and he really developing that character and those personalities.
Damn, that's gonna bug me too now.
I know, right?
Damn it! Fuck. Not Rhea. Fucking A. Whatever.
Yeah, my comics are away in the other room, and I'm too lazy to stand up and go get them. But yeah, it felt like something that would have done, but it would have been done with a character that had more than 2 issues of backstory to develop. So by dropping the reader in media res like that, it definitely has some strengths with the relationships that you're seeing, and it really shows off just how sharp Gerard Way's dialogue in the book actually is, because he is able to establish so many of those relationships and this has always been my favorite quote about writing comics. It's from G. Willow Wilson. She was talking about writing an X-Men comic and how you're supposed to tell an entire story on a page with a haiku's worth of dialogue. And Way manages to do that. He never overwrites the scene. He never puts in too much or overinflates anything. It's incredibly sharp dialogue-wise and storytelling-wise, but I'm afraid, like you said, he may have boiled away just a little too much for my taste. Maybe even just if it had been a 7-issue miniseries as opposed to a 6-issue miniseries, and we got to spend a little bit more time with the White Violin prior to becoming that.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like it comes out of nowhere, except for, of course, it doesn't because it can't.
Yeah. Well, that's also, I think it goes back to just kind of, I mean, I take it for granted, but knowing a lot about the author, And really quick, I did want to give a shout out to Dave Stewart, who was a colorist on it too.
Yes. Oh my God, the colors are sparse but brilliant in their sparsity.
Exactly. It's like a bright dull, and it's amazing because of it. But anyway, Gerard Way was someone, for those who don't know, most people know him as was the lead singer for My Chemical Romance. But more so, before MCR, he was an intern at Marvel. He was even through school, very artistic, and comics was his thing. He's not someone that, there's a lot of musicians or people that jump into comics later in life because they have the opportunity, because Marvel, DC, Dark Horse comes to them and is like, hey, we can give you money if you do this, your name sells. He is someone that he's always loved comics. He grew up reading, a lot of Doom Patrol, a lot of stuff like Kill Your Boyfriend, those comics, especially the Grant Morrison, Vertigo era comics, the Neil Gaiman-esque comics, all those comics that were very writer-heavy, but very odd, very weird, but also had a ton of heart to them. So, not after My Chem, but he had these stories in My Chem forums, and about a few years into it is when this comes out. And this is something that is very much in his realm of everything. It's Doom Patrol, which he grew up listening to. He's obviously in a band, in a kind of this misfit band, which, for anyone who knows, they were a band that they were, for a short period of time, they were the band, they were the big band, and a lot of people hated them. A lot of people didn't understand why people liked them, which is, I think, in terms of writing a X-Men Doom Patrol-esque comic, adds a lot to it, because he kind of lived that scenario of, hey, everyone knows him, and a lot of people don't like him just because they're different than the norm.
I will admit, I was one of the people who did not like the band until they kind of brightened up a little bit and started having Grant Morrison in their videos.
Yes, there you go. Which is also great. But I'm getting back to that, just because I think that's why these characters, like you said, in such short dialogues, it's so easy for him to get in their heads. And because I honestly believe a lot of what's left out is stuff that he does have plans for other stories. And I know it's kind of annoying to say that, but I also know that he's someone that it may take forever, but we'll go back to those and not retroactively, but make them more important because they came out later. Like Volume 3 is, as of right now, I believe, Hotel Oblivion, which is mentioned in Volume 1.
Right.
As maybe the catalyst for what caused a lot of their inner turmoil in the group.
Right, and like I say, I don't mind the idea of holding back because there's future stories to be told.
Yeah.
I feel like in that particular case, I mean, the thrust of the A plot is White Violin's descent into supervillainy, essentially, and the Umbrella Academy having to basically come back together as a team to stop their former teammate, which is, it's a well-fine and good story. I just felt like for the White Violin to work as a villain, we needed to know more of her as a hero / put down and put upon character. I mean, we totally got that was her background, and that would be something that would lead her to villainy.
Yes.
But we literally had no flashes of any insight into the fact that she could have power, except for, you play the violin really good, until the bad guys brought that power out of her, and it just felt a little too pat to me, I guess. The way I keep saying it is, she didn't have any powers until, of course, she did. But that's what it feels like. There's almost no build-up. She has powers because the plot and the story demand it. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying I wish it had just a touch more setup.
The small thing is about, and this is the problem where it comes to very nuanced stuff, because this book runs a gamut from, like you said, being very over the top and very crazy in the best possible way to very nuanced in a good way, but it's little shit you have to pick up. If I remember correctly, it is slightly addressed where it's she's the only member of the team on medication. Throughout.
See, now that you say that, I remember that being a piece of the dialogue, but until you said it, it had totally slipped my mind.
And the big thing is that's Hargreaves suppressing. The big thing is that would be Hargreaves suppressing her, and then the conductor bringing that out.
Right, and that makes total sense, and I seem to remember that. It just,
like I said,
it was such a little detail that on my initial reading that did slip by me.
Exactly, it's one of those small things that's like, and it's not a bad thing on the reader or anything, because it is. I think Umbrella Academy itself is treated as one of the things where you can get it on multiple levels, and some of that stuff like that, like I don't know when I picked that up on, because honestly I can't say that I know my first second read. I didn't go, oh, maybe the medication's what caused her. I don't believe so, at least. But I know that there are just a lot of little things like that, and that that could definitely be a con for a lot of people. That stuff is easy to miss. I'll be the first to admit there are a few of the important details that you can get away with not knowing. That sounds weird to say, but it's what they are. That if you miss them, you will still understand what's going on, but there will be the lingering questions of what the was that. And there are a lot of moments of just what the fuck in this book that makes sense for the book.
Right.
That would very easily ruin another book. Even stuff like the mother being revealed to be a robot out of nowhere. Right. Which is all.
Not just a robot, but like a mannequin.
Yeah, like
which was super cool. That reveal is really brilliant.
It is. Like there are just some pieces of this book that are they come out of nowhere but fit so well they shouldn't. I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier about it all, what's still crazy to me is I love Gerard Way's writing. I do. I'm very biased on that. At the same time, it's still insane to think this is his first major release, and it wins an Eisner. And how well it's put together, like you said, it blends that line of homage and parody without ever making it a full-on Austin Powers. It's almost like Kingsman, the movie. We mentioned it a few times here lately, and that's what honestly, in a weird way of tone, I could compare it to, where it has a very much homage feel. It has its own thing, but never goes so far into parody that it becomes what it's not. And I say Kingsman, the movie, because the comic does have some of those exact same problems.
Because Millar only knows how to go big, and then Matthew Vaughn takes Millar going big and being like, well, if we adjust this and we push this over to the side a little bit, and he actually makes it into a workable story. But that's another podcast.
Well, that's actually kind of fit in here, though, because the bigger thing we can talk about is how this is, because of things like this and because of MCR, in a lot of ways, Gerard Way, after Morrison had, as he himself says, given up a lot of faith in humanity, Gerard Way somewhat became not a protege, but his next somewhat people, and somewhat someone that he was just very proud of their work, and someone that he was very much saying is like the next generation of writer.
Right.
And it's something that goes from Umbrella Academy, and we can compare it just really quick because I think it is relevant, is that Millar is someone that was definitely Morrison's straight up pupil, straight up, protege to a lot of things, helped him a lot, did a lot of stuff for him. And he never really got some of the stuff that makes Morrison books Morrison, where Way got the nuances that make Morrison books, and you twisted them and uses them in books like Umbrella Academy to make them his own. Even stuff like the White Violin is a character that on paper sounds everything and nothing like a Morrison character should be.
To take a more literary and slightly weirder comparison, it feels like Joe Hill to Stephen King. Joe Hill is actually Stephen King's son. Hill is his mother's maiden name. And he has actually outpaced his father as far as being a writer goes. I love Stephen King, don't get me wrong, but a lot of Stephen King's recent output has been kind of crappy. He has almost never known how to stick the landing of a novel. He can tell a great story, but he almost never knows how to end it properly. And sometimes his dialogue can come off kind of hokey. He's got a really great description, especially describing stuff from the past. I never feel more immersed in the America of 30, 40 years ago than when I'm reading a Stephen King novel. But his son definitely has a more contemporary feel, a more flashy feel. He still gets across the horror, but he doesn't take any time to get there. He's right on top of it. His books just move like fucking charged full of methane, and he knows how to write a fucking ending.
Ooh.
So I feel like almost that Way could almost in certain ways surpass Morrison, because whereas Morrison has gotten more and more ethereal in his storytelling, he's trying new things, and for better or for worse, he's trying to expand the medium of comics, and it's to sometimes it's the point of detriment to his stories. I know a lot of people found Final Crisis particularly very dense and unreadable. I'm having a lot of I don't want to say trouble, but I'm having to use a lot of brain power to parse Nameless right now. It's not that it's a bad story in any way, but it's one of them I'm going to have to sit down with all 6 issues and read in a go and really chew on to get exactly what kind of the exact level of Lovecraftian horror he's trying to put his particular spin on. Whereas I think Way, I don't want to say better,
but well,
and it may just be that he is a neophyte, but his story structure is a lot more. He manages to use the crazy and weird elements, but he manages to keep a story structure that is a lot more linear in a way that Morrison has definitely kind of walked away from.
Yes, that's what I could say is Way, especially for a first output, the pacing and just the story process is so dead on in this book. It's just so, there's not a lot of wasted space in this book, which is what so many, first or early outputs have the problem with. The problem with it is normally not that they're not good or fun, it's that there's a lot of extra stuff that either doesn't need to be there, or panels that slow the movement down, or what have you. Whereas this book, for the most part, the pacing, it's one of those books where it's partly because I love it, but also just because of how it's written and how quick it reads. Is you can pick it up, read issue 1, and it's one of those things, almost like a Dan Brown book of, oh, that felt pretty short. Let me go to issue 2. Let me go to issue 3.
Yeah. The best thing about the book, I will say, is, and I've already mentioned it once on this show, but I'll say it again. It is not in any way, shape, or form overwritten. But the fact that it's not overwritten does not mean that it's not well written. It is incredibly well written. The short, sharp sentences that this man uses to tell his story, the dialogue, the clip of the dialogue, like you just said, the pacing, it's all very on point in a way that I'm really impressed. As someone, not to toot my own horn too hard here, as someone who's written the first issue of a comic, I will fully admit my comic's a little overwritten. My first issue, there's at least one scene, it's a little wordy. He does not have that. He does not suffer from first issue-itis. He does not suffer from exposition-itis. As I said before, I felt it, to a certain extent that was to the book's detriment as far as one particular character's arc was concerned. But for the overall story and the pacing of the story, I think it's very sharp.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a million times. It's what got me to not just like comics, but really, really love them because of that. Because it was something that was just so dead on and so on point, and does have little twists and curves here that even the ones you see coming, normally how they pay off aren't exactly what you expect. Like even the ending, how they stop the villain and stuff, is a great ending for the book, but still has that, like you said, sense of parody to it that is so weird. Just seeing, once again, we're going to make a spoiler, seeing like White Violin defeated in the hospital bed, just in the semi-vegetative, like crazy weird state of them like saving her, but not really saving her.
Right, exactly. Which is a very, again, Morrison Doom Patrol-esque ending.
Yes, it's very much to that book, and even going into, I will say, I think this one, the first Volume 1 of Umbrella Academy, which of course we're focused on, is very, very much like you said, homage to it, and Volume 2 goes much more into, I like to think of it more as if Gerard Way has straight up written Umbrella Academy, because I'll just say, I know you haven't read it, I guess I won't talk about it much, but Dallas focuses more on number 5 and his time travels and what happened, and the villains that, basically this time police that are, not time police, but this time force that's following him through the cracks.
Yeah, we really haven't talked about him any this episode. He was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean,
he kind of reminded me of a more dickish Doctor Who.
Yes, exactly. It's another interesting character where that's what Way does so well in this book. He sets up these archetypal characters, but with these small little twists that kind of just throw them off. Number 5 is a person that on a mission one day just kind of disappears because he goes through time. He goes through time, and he just comes back. And he comes back as a 10-year-old boy who is basically in the body of a 10-year-old boy, but in reality, much like Doctor Who, he is very, very old. Except instead of Doctor Who has the luxury of normally being in a 20 to 40-year-old man, where he's stuck in a 10-year-old boy, but with 80-year-old wisdom and 30-year-old thoughts and wants. which is something not unique to him, but just such a fun character to be thrown in the mix of it all.
Yeah, God, who did it remind me of? Other than Doctor Who, I had another reference I wanted to make. Maybe Claudia from Interview with the Vampire. That was kind of coming up on close to the end here, I think. But there was one more thing I wanted to touch on, which was you mentioned his archetypes. And I do think you could definitely see he was playing with archetypes and story ideas that were very personal and passionate to him.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, Space Boy is very clearly a 50s pulp sci-fi novel archetype.
Yeah.
Rumor is more of a traditional superhero. Seance was very much a 90s Vertigo character. Number 5 being, like I said, kind of a dickish Doctor Who. They're all elements of other bits and pieces of pop culture that he clearly has a lot of passion and a lot of love for, but he makes them work together and play together in a singular universe in a way that holds up and makes sense, which I think is pretty fantastic.
Well, yeah, I mean, because this is something that I've always loved about it, is that I could see any of these single characters having, and it's not just a run, but having a series of comics, because in a way this feels like a very weird, twisted Doom Patrol, Umbrella Academy, or even a twisted Justice League or Avengers to a degree, where you do have people going off, and we see the brief bit at the beginning doing their own thing and then coming together. And they're characters that, had they been written just a little bit differently, may have worked horribly together because they are so different. Like you said, you essentially have a 50s character, a 90s character, 2000s character, and a character that's running the gamut of years, and a few other.
Oh, and Squid Boy, who I think had a real touch of Lovecraftian horror too.
Yes.
Which was what I wanted to bring up. I wish we got to see his power more as an adult, because I really loved that visual.
And what's also, that's another one of the weird mysteries of even how his death is. Like horror's death and his whole statue stuff, it's always such this layer of mystery to him. Mm-hmm. That's another thing that I'm sure we'll eventually catch up on, but it's very weird.
Yeah, and again, that's one of those things that there's definitely a story to be told there, probably sometime in the future, but the little bits that we get are pretty spectacular.
Oh, we didn't even talk about stuff like Dr. Pogo, the talking chimp, the monocle's assistant.
Yes, yeah, I kept thinking about him, and I kept meaning to bring him up, and I kept getting sidetracked with other things. Yeah, the very fact that the assistant / butler / male nursemaid to the children was a talking chimpanzee.
Oh, and then,
which, again, it's very much kind of an Island of Dr. Moreau-esque take on a character / again, 50s pulp sci-fi or pulp horror even, look at a character. And it works. It works within this universe because of the way arranges the universe around that concept.
And then, well, I'm trying, before we run out of time here, we also have, who's another one? The Commissioner Gordon-esque character, Inspector Lupo.
Oh, yeah, he only had a couple of pages in the first volume.
Yes, but I just think it's another thing of just having fun, and those characters that you can immediately recognize who they are, basically, but just thrown into, the only thing I compare this comic to, actually, now that it's been out, is almost a Cobra kind of thing. In its own... Cobra Suicide Squad, this is very much Doom Patrol, I guess is what I'm saying.
I can definitely see the comparison. I think Michel Fife allows himself a little bit more leeway as far as what he's homaging.
Yeah.
And what tropes in comics he's wanting to play with. Because, I mean, he has a fucking Shade the Changing Man. From the 70s Ditko Shade the Changing Man, mind you, not the 90s Peter Milligan Vertigo Shade the Changing Man, as a primary character in his story, which, that's batshit. That's bonkers in a way that even Umbrella Academy can't touch. But I can definitely see the comparison. There's some crazy alternate world out there where Michel Fife is getting to do Suicide Squad every month, and it's him. It's just him writing and drawing it every month out of his house. And, Gerard Way is getting to do the Doom Patrol in the DC universe, in DC continuity. And that is a wonderful universe that I'm kind of sad we do not get to live in.
God, if we could get that. Well, I'll go with this as one of the last things. We've said it. It was an article, I brought it up about Gerard Way talking about the influences of first volume of Umbrella Academy, and yeah, it's Grant Morrison and his work on Doom Patrol with DC Comics. Pat McGoran of Zombie World, Champion of the Worm, and Edvin Bjorvork, his Grindel Tales.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I need to read those, but I can definitely understand the influence.
And no, there's some major ones, but yeah, it's a book that I have always loved. I've always told people, if you're at all interested in the weirder aspects of superhero comics, but don't want to go back and find hard to find ones, because this is normally Umbrella Academy is pretty easy to find. It's because it's an Eisner winner and Dark Horse. It's one of Dark Horse's best selling books. They keep it in print a lot. It's not that hard to find.
It seems to be an evergreen title. It's definitely one that more often than not we have on the shelves at my store.
Yeah, I mean, most major places that have any kind of graphic novels will have it. It's not hard to find. It's because we mentioned Doom Patrol tons of stuff, so I know both highly recommend Doom Patrol as well, but Doom Patrol can be very hard to find. It's
absolutely, yeah.
Like, it's even semi in print. I know the omnibus is out. I know the old trade paperbacks aren't impossible to find, but they're not easy.
Yeah, I don't think the paperbacks are currently in print. I think they're still selling through the overprint that they had for that one, so they are getting harder to find.
Yes, and if we're talking about these, I think another good story to go with this that I mention all the time, and another one of my favorite, is also somewhat is in the realm of like Secret Six type of stuff. Just as far as the, not parody or anything, but the sensibilities of it. Almost like grounded, but with weird stuff that'll happen. Mm-hmm. And once again, I think Gerard Way and Gail Simone, Becky Cloonan, those are three writers that are always kind of put together because I feel like they're cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. With very different ideas in the long run. But I think it's in that same realm of people. This is one of those books I think, it's already an Eisner winner, has done a lot of influential work, but I think will be one that people go back to in several years, and it will be something that has helped inspire people, and will be a bigger book in the end than it already is. Unless Volume 3 comes out and it's total shit. I don't see that happening. But nonetheless, I'm very glad you finally read Umbrella Academy Volume 1, because I've been trying to get you to read that for, I think, since I've met you pretty much.
Yeah, it's been, 5 years?
yeah, it's been a long time, because I think that goes back, I think one of our first conversations, we were talking about comics, and we had some like Transmetropolitan and Umbrella Academy conversation. Because at the time, I hadn't read Transmetropolitan, you hadn't read Umbrella Academy, and those at the
that
time,
sounds right.
Yeah, at the time, I think those were both what we claim to be our favorites, and I think are still somewhat in that realm.
Yeah, Transmetropolitan, when we made our official list, I had to put it at number 3 for me, which is still very high up there. X-Men beat it out by virtue of being X-Men, and then, honestly, my favorite comic is Y: The Last Man.
Yeah, there you go. That would definitely be... Yeah, like I said before, Umbrella Academy, it's up... If I want to put it up there, it's up there with, like, Flex Mentallo, and... I'm trying some other stuff that I really love that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. But it's like...
Which is totally fine.
Yeah, it's a book that I cannot speak enough about and praise enough about. I mean, I could honestly keep on going forever, because it's a story that I love and has been hugely influential with me, and just... Like you said, the sharp delivery is something that not enough comics know how to do. Just that quick, where it's not only is it not overwritten, but sharp tongue, sharp written, just here it is and keep on going, where you don't have to. It's not so vague that you don't know what happened. It's not overwritten to where you're Todd McFarlane, I can't say it. I was going to try to make his word into a verb and it didn't work, but you're not doing a Todd McFarlane thing of taking an hour and a half to finish 2 panels.
Right.
And we have a lot of that, but even titles that I love today still suffer from that aspect of where it's a go-to in comics, sadly, where, hey, if it's not 100% clear what's going on, let's overwrite what's going on.
Right.
And I've always been a fan of the reverse. I would rather figure out just by context clues than figure out by overwriting. I know a lot of people don't like that, honestly. There's a lot of people that would rather pick up an issue and be like, what kind of we talk about with the problem with a lot of Morrison stuff today is he's gotten to a point of not only not caring if the people know what's going on necessarily, of him just completely putting it on some people to be like, hey, I know what's going on, you should probably figure it out. Or to nameless, it may mean, hey, I don't know what's going on, so you probably should know what's going on.
Also great, yeah.
Which, completely off topic, I read 18 Days finally, and I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad, yeah, me too. It was one of those Morrison books that was a little bit more just straightforward, all things considered.
What's cool?
But then again, he's really trying to tell a very specific myth.
Which is, it's kind of interesting to me, it's bringing the Mahabharata, that very Eastern religious book, to the masses of America, but in a comic form, which I like. It's cool, and it has a cool interview in the backing about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really kind of wish actually they had put that interview and everything in the front of the book, because it put everything in the book into so much more context that it made me want to go back and like immediately reread the first issue, because I felt like I would have understood a lot more.
Yeah.
And I still need to actually reread it with that context in mind. But yeah, other than kind of wishing they put the back matter in the front, it was a very solid first issue.
Especially for $1.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we got off topic, and that's okay. But Umbrella Academy Volume, like I said, that's Volume 1. My favorite of all time. I'm glad. It sounds like you enjoyed it a lot.
I did, very much so. Thank you for the incessant recommendations.
Yeah, you are welcome. I'll recommend more, because if anyone reads it because of this, you should definitely know Volume 2 is out, Dallas. Volume 3 is in the works, and it's supposedly coming out either into this year, probably not, probably next year. Killjoys is out, which that's a very interesting one, where these two are not really connected to his music so much at all. There's like one or two B-sides off of Black Parade that are straight connected to Umbrella Academy. Danger Days, True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys is a sequel to the album of the same name from Mike Kim, but it's written by him and Becky Cloonan and art by Sean Simon, I believe. I would also highly recommend that if you like this book at all, just dive in. And he's doing more and more comic stuff. We talked about his Spider-Verse issue that was really crazy and awesome not that long ago. Mm-hmm. He had a Vertigo yellow comic of that quarterly that was really good. And Gabriel Baugh and Fabio Moon, if you guys don't know them, Gabriel Baugh, who does the art for this, his brother Fabio Moon, they do a lot of crazy, weird art for Casanova is another big one that they do art for.
Yeah, that is one I need to sit down and read the first trade for. That's another mini-sode if I could ever get the damn trade read.
Yeah, that's another one on my favorite list. I love Casanova. And speaking of that, reading this Casanova Arcadia issue 3, I believe, comes out tomorrow after God knows how long since issue 2.
Same with Sex Criminals. Sex Criminals had a huge break.
And it goes back to the Sandman thing, or All-Star Superman 2, where when it's an amazing book, the delays don't really matter, but those 5 months in between they're killer.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember at all what happened in the last issue of either of those, honestly.
Right, same here.
But yeah, so that's our semi-quick review and talk about Umbrella Academy. I'm sure there's a lot we missed and stuff, but I think we hit the big points, unless there's anything else you'd like to talk about.
No, I think we hit all the points I really wanted to navigate and negotiate. I think we had a good overall talk about it. I do want to say before we cut out to check us out for our next show, our promised Avengers cast.
Yes.
We'll be talking about our favorite Avengers villains, and our favorite Avengers story arcs.
Yes, everything Avengers all the time. I want to say I went to Half Price Books today, or 2 days ago. We need to start a Kickstarter, because they do have the deluxe edition of Umbrella Academy Volume 1 there, and there's only like 500 of those in existence, and they're all signed by Jardway and Gabriel Baugh, so if people like to give me money, do that.
I think that's a wonderful idea. If you want to contact us in a way to give Colby money, or if you want to just chat about the Avengers, give us some questions or comments or ideas for our Avengers cast, you can always email us at blahblahpodcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter. I'm at VoodooBen.
I'm at HellhoundF5.
And that is it for our mini-cast. Join us next time for Avengers.
Everything Avengers in the world.
Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Bye.
Bye.